the darkest years of World War II, when India's freedom seemed a distant dream, a new voice rose from the east, a voice that would shake an empire. It was the voice of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose and the army he built, the Azad Hind Fauj. The story began on the 17th of February 1942 in Singapore, when Captain General Ram Singh formed the Indian National Army with Indian prisoners of war captured by Japan. But disagreements with the Japanese authorities led to the army's disbandment later that year. But a year later, everything changed. On the 25th of August 1943, Subhash Chandra Bose arrived to revive the Indian National Army, giving it vision, discipline and a cause larger than life. His thunderous call, "Give me blood and I will give you freedom," became the battle cry of Bharatiya across continents. Soon after, on the 21st of October 1943 in Singapore, Subhash Chandra Bose announced the creation of the Provisional Government of Azad Hind. This, he pledged, a free Bharat founded on equality, justice and unity beyond caste, creed or religion. And on the 22nd of October 1943, Netaji Bose broke another barrier, forming the Rani of Jhansi Regiment, led by Captain Lakshmi Swaminathan, one of the world's first all-women combat units. For the first time, Bharatiya women took up arms not just as nurses or helpers, but as soldiers of liberation. Though the Azad Hind Fauj did not win independence on the battlefield, it won something greater. It shattered the myth of British invincibility. The British realized that Bharat could no longer be ruled by fear. When INA soldiers were put on trial, a wave of sympathy and protest swept across the country. The INA trial sparked mutinies in the Royal Indian Navy and unrest across the Air Force and the Army, proving that Bharatiya soldiers would no longer fight their own people. It was clear that the British Raj was standing on borrowed time. But after independence, the heroes of the Azad Hind Fauj were not given the place they deserved. In 1948, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru discussed reinstating INA men into the Indian Army. Yet, senior officers advised against it, calling it unwise and disruptive. Nehru replied, "I disagree with your reasons, but I agree with your conclusions." And with that, the INA soldiers were left out in the cold. They received some benefits, but not the recognition they had earned in blood and sacrifice. The British perception that INA soldiers were disloyal lingered on, unquestioned by those who now led the new Indian state. In 1949, a rally in Mumbai urged the government to support the families of the fallen INA soldiers. Brigadier Deepak Sinha wrote, "This perception of the Azad Hind Fauj soldiers being disloyal and untrustworthy as promoted by the British was unquestioningly accepted by the former Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and his cabal at the time of independence. That Nehru saw in Netaji and those who had joined him a likely obstacle to his own political ambitions and aspirations must clearly have been an important factor in his actions that ensured that the senior hierarchy of the Indian National Army, or the INA, was left out in the cold after independence." Though veterans like Captain Ram Singh, who composed Azad Hind Fauj's marching song "Kadam Kadam Badhaye Ja," was honoured by the central government as well as the governments of Uttar Pradesh and Sikkim, Captain Thakur's final years were difficult and controversial, for which the government drew much criticism. He was initially denied the status of a freedom fighter by the government, while the state government of Uttar Pradesh later faced contempt proceedings for withholding the corresponding payment, although the amount in question was meagre. Captain Ram Singh continued to cope with this neglect and humiliation. His predicament was best spelt out by the judgment of the Lucknow bench of the Allahabad High Court, and the judgment said, "It is unfortunate and a matter of concern for this court that Captain Ram Singh, who was awarded the King George VI Medal in 1937 for the services rendered by him in the Northwest frontier from 1937 to 1939, has been treated shabbily by the state government." The judges further observed, "It is really sad that Captain Ram Singh has been denied the respect and regard which is due to him. If we cannot do anything more for him, at least we must provide him with a decent living." In February 1955, In an interview with BBC's Francis Watson, Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar or Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar wondered, I don't know how Mr. Attlee suddenly agreed to give Bharat independence. That is a secret that he will disclose in his autobiography. None expected that he would do that. Ambedkar told the BBC that from his own analysis, he had figured out what had convinced the Labour Party to take the decision to free India. The INA activities of Subhas Chandra Bose, which weakened the very foundation of the British Empire in India, and the RIN or the Royal Indian Navy mutiny, which made the British realize that the Indian armed forces could no longer be trusted to prop up the British. Justice Chakravarti, the first Indian to become permanent Chief Justice of India's oldest court, also asked Attlee about the extent of Gandhi's influence upon the British decision to quit India. In Chakravarti's words, hearing this question, Attlee's lips became twisted in a sarcastic smile as he slowly chewed out the word minimal. In 1960, in Nuffield College, Oxford, Attlee repeated the same statement to historian Barun Beg. The assessment reports of the country's situation at the end of 1945 and early 1946 by the Viceroy and Commander-in-Chief provide a clear insight into why the Attlee government was in a rush. Commander-in-Chief of the British Indian Army, Field Marshal Claude Auchinleck's 24th November 1945 report on the internal situation in India clearly stated, it is a reasonable assumption, therefore, that widespread trouble, either communal or anti-government or both, is to be expected in the late spring. He expected the scale of disturbances to be much greater than what was seen in 1942. He pointed out the uncertainties around the army in such an eventuality, uncertainties that largely were triggered by the INA. I consider that there must be doubt as to the continued loyalty of the armed forces unless government produce a strong and unequivocal statement of policy comprehensible by the rank and file. He said that the government must declare that any armed insurrection will be put down by force if necessary and the leaders punished. Auchinleck went on to the extent of asking the British government to be prepared with plans for sending British reinforcement troops to India for its reconquest. If the Indian forces as a whole cease to be reliable, the British armed forces now available are not likely to be able to control the internal situation or to protect essential communications, nor would any piecemeal reinforcements of these forces be of much avail. To regain control of the situation and to restore essential communications within the country, nothing short of an organized campaign for the reconquest of India is likely to suffice. The situation in India is therefore extremely delicate. I request therefore that plans may be prepared for the dispatch to India of such British formations as could be made available. In a social media post earlier on Tuesday, Home Minister Amit Shah said that through the Azad Hind Fauj, Netaji instilled a strong belief in the hearts of the revolutionaries that the countrymen could achieve freedom through their own army and military campaigns. He further said that Netaji and the soldiers of the INA will remain an eternal inspiration for the nation-first ethos.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.